But just last week, a couple days ago, Dr. Mercola wrote how vaccines have serious side effects, and the Institute of Medicine says so. That is, they're now admitting that vaccines are not free from side effects or adverse effects. They're admitting that the admission came after a review of more than 1,000 vaccine studies, which found convincing evidence of 14 health outcomes, including seizures, inflammation of the brain, and fainting that could be caused by certain vaccines. The truth is, nobody knows how many vaccine victims there are in America and how many of the 1 in 6 learning disabled children, or 1 in 9 with asthma, or the 1 in 100 who develop autism, or the 1 in 450 who become diabetic can trace it to the chronic inflammation, disease, and disability back to the vaccine reactions. And yet we know it's going on. Now, of course, with public health coming up to speed in the 50s, we've seen most of the worst kinds of infectious diseases go way down. And yet these vaccines are being pushed by the establishment with the perception that it's mandatory when, of course, it isn't. We all have a right to our own freedom and health, despite what the Wisconsin judge would say. But these vaccines are admittedly causing more problems than the diseases they attempt to cut down on. Now, at the same time, we have a clip about the whooping cough out of New Zealand, where they've again made it seem like it's mandatory and people are getting hurt by it. Here's one of those clips right now.
Brittany Collins is the hidden face of vaccinations.
There you go, Brittany.
Wheelchair bound, brain damaged.
She's severely disabled. I mean, she's lovely.
She was crippled by a vaccine.
She can't stand or sit or hold anything.
The 20-year-old is on accident compensation for an adverse reaction to the whooping cough vaccine.
Yeah.
Since Brittany's elder brother had an adverse reaction to the whooping cough vaccine, Cherie asked her specialist if she should vaccinate Brittany.
And he said yes, immunise her at normal. There's no chance of reaction, she'll be fine.
And what occurred after that?
She became very unhappy. She basically was screaming night and day. It was quite a strange cry.
That's enough, but you notice how this poor girl who was damaged, permanently disabled for the rest of her life, they told her to get the vaccine even after her own brother was damaged by it. And the same disgusting Tdap push was happening in America. You saw in California, Natoma's school officials go door to door to find unvaccinated students, and this ignorant, just hateful little boot-licking system lover had the audacity to go to people's doors and tell them it's required to get vaccines when it's been on record for years that there's a waiver for religious or even just personal conscientious objection. And again, these vaccines are doing more harm than the diseases they try to stop. You also saw Mike Adams of Natural News reporting that the CDC is now calling homes in the U.S. and demanding that they provide their child's immunization records as part of a vaccine surveillance and tracking program. And it's just pure intimidation. There's no law. We have a right to our own bodies and to at least attempt to make responsible decisions, yet they persist in this. I believe we have another clip. Let's go to that right now.
This is Jasmine Renata. She was just 18 when she died. Her family suspect a vaccine was to blame. Her parents believe the Gardasil vaccine, aimed to combat cervical cancer, took her life almost 2 years ago.
After the first injection, she said she had the tinglings in her hands. She said her hands had pins and needles in them. She's getting stomach pains, warts on her hands, and then the chest pains that she was having and the racing heart. And it was just one thing after another.
A year later, and 6 months after her third injection, Rhonda would have her last conversation with Jasmine.
She put her hand out and she goes, "Look, these warts are coming back again."
The next day, they found their girl dead in bed. The Renatas have sent Jasmine's tissue samples to a Canadian neuroscientist for further testing.
He says he happens to share my belief that aluminium and other toxic compounds in the vaccine may have been the key causal factors in Jasmine's health problems and death.
And of course, that is not the only clip. Both of these are from foreign media news services, but we have CBS here in America with dozens of reports on the harm that Gardasil's done to girls. Now they're pushing it on boys as well. And of course, right now in the GOP primary, we have globalist Bilderberg attendee pimp Rick Perry, who gave the perception that it was mandated in Texas, which really got the ball rolling for the Gardasil in particular. Of course, he had Merck donations and the rest of it. And you heard Russell Blaylock last week on Infowars Nightly News talking about how well under 2% of people even report the adverse reactions, and yet more than 18,000 adverse reactions have been reported, far more than the annual deaths from cervical cancer, which Gardasil is expected to treat, or supposedly would treat. And there's been many deaths as well, at least 30 reported, but I know it's much more than that. It is so sad that they push this forward. We're going to go now to Dr. Nikki Turner from the Immunization Advisory Center, IMAC, and she's defending vaccines, admitting, well, there could be reactions, but we're going to force them on the whole public anyway. It's time to wake up to this and stop going along with this thing we've gotten used to where everyone's supposed to get these vaccines. That clip now, please.
So paralysis from Guillain-Barré syndrome, 4 cases. Serious?
Guillain-Barré can be serious. It's a spectrum. It can be very mild to really serious. So if you have a Guillain-Barré case, you'll pay out on ACC because it may have been associated with the vaccine, and we will never know.
So why don't I, when I pick up my leaflet that says, caution, this vaccine could paralyse your child?
Yes, well, it does in the data sheets, but your pamphlet would need to be more than 2 pages long because of all the possibilities of what any medication or vaccine could possibly relate it to. In New Zealand, we have no recorded deaths from vaccination. It's really important that we report everything that happens after a vaccination. You'll see a lot of reports related to children who have died after vaccinations were given, but we are vaccinating pretty well every child in the population. You're going to see deaths happening, and my understanding from the data is none of them have been shown to be caused by the vaccine.
It says medicine may be contributory.
Yeah, that would be the standard way of saying it, because in science you would never say never appropriately. So that if we do get a case or a second case or a third case.
Yeah, no confirmed deaths, but of course deaths will happen, and isn't it annoying how long the adverse reaction sheet is and the warnings?